Welcome, participants. I can see people starting to filter in. We'll give it a minute here to let you all get into the session. Welcome, welcome. I don't know, we have 10. I think that might be our group since its number's not jumping up anymore. I'll talk slowly. We're so excited. I'm going to speak for the group for a second. Even though we've never met in person, I'm really excited to moderate this panel discussion with my esteemed colleagues from some of my favorite competitor business schools. It's great to see this list of names of folks who are joining us, and we're excited to get started. The numbers are not climbing, so I think that's our group. So I'm going to jump right in. I'm Leslie Nesbitt. I'm one of the associate directors within the admissions office at Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth. I'm the military liaison within the office. I did not have the honor of serving this country, but I do have the honor of working with our entire veterans pool, active duty and veteran and reservists. And it's an incredible honor to do so. And so I'm thrilled to be here, especially focusing particularly on female active duty folks and veterans as well. It's something that we talk about a lot within the office, and I talk with our current students, and I see my colleagues nodding, so I know that's a shared feeling. So maybe I'll say just another one sentence about me, and then I'm gonna, what I'll do, folks, for the panelists is just call on you on my screen just to keep us organized. So I've been doing admissions work for most of my career, but I did start in boarding schools as a teacher, coach, dorm head. So I think there are often some overlap with being a lifelong athlete and being in the military. I think that might be some of my attraction to the work. But I've been in admissions in independent schools and higher ed for, oh my gosh, 15 years or more. And this is my 4th year at Dartmouth and my 3rd year at Tuck. So Megan, you happen to be at the top of my screen, so why don't you go next?
Thank you so much. So welcome everyone. My name is Megan Pollard. I am the Program Director of Admissions and Campus Events at the Fuqua School of Business. I too am the military liaison. I've not had the honor to serve, but I have the honor to work with those students who have. So I've had family that have served as well. Been with Fuqua for over 21 years, so it's a passion and a love of mine, and just excited that y'all are here.
Nicole, how about you? You're up next.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here with you this evening or morning or wherever you're calling from. It happens to be late afternoon here in California. I am one of the associate directors for the Berkeley Haas School of Business out in the Bay Area in California. I have been with Haas for about almost 2 years now. Before that, I was with their School of Public Health, leading their admissions team. And then before that, I was actually at the Tuck School of Business for many years. And I don't think I overlapped with you, Leslie, because it's been about 5 years since I've been there.
Oh, I just missed you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's you know, Haas is a great school, and I too am also the military liaison on our team. Also did not have the honor to serve, but I love working with the military students in our school. They're a great group, and just their passion just comes out all the time, and I love it. So yeah, happy to be here this evening.
Thanks, Nicole. Michael, you're next.
Thanks, Leslie. Glad to be here. Hello, everybody. My name is Michael Lippert. I'm one of the Senior Associate Directors of Admissions at Michigan Ross in Ann Arbor. I've been at the University of Michigan in admissions for about 6 years now. I actually grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I came to Ann Arbor sight unseen, and I fell in love with this place and did my undergrad here. I got into admissions when my wife was actually a Ross student. So I saw student life really up close, and I'll quickly shout out, like, my absolute favorite thing to talk about in this role is talking with folks who have a significant other. And I know that is far more common with a lot of our veterans who are in the program. I absolutely love talking about it. I had an incredible experience, and I know a lot of the schools here tonight offer great partner programming, and it's really important. So always happy to talk more about that. I'm also the military liaison at Ross. It's one of the best parts of my job. So excited to be here tonight.
Thanks, Michael. All right, Blair, you're up.
Thanks, Leslie. I will, echo all of you guys and say I've also not had the pleasure to serve, but my name is Blair Mannix. I'm the director of admissions at the Wharton School. Similar to you, Leslie, although I didn't have a boarding school background, I have been in admissions my whole career, all at Penn and Wharton. I've been in this office for just shy of 10 years and in this chair for about 3. And similar to many folks on this panel, one of my favorite things to do is work with our veterans. And I'm excited that we have a critical mass of folks on, because and I think we'll talk about this tonight and everybody will echo it, but really business school is like the perfect education path for veterans. So I'm excited you guys even know that it's a thing and you're in this call and we can tell you all about it. And obviously we can all be connected. And I think it's just exciting that this is like a good path, because it really is the perfect path, no matter where you go. So I just wanted to say that.
That is a very nice segue, Miss Blair. Thank you. Just in terms of like logistics for this session, because since we can't see all of your fantastic faces in our webinar format, for all of our participants, please feel free to send along questions in the chat or the Q&A. I'll monitor both of them. You can also raise your hand. It's a small enough group, so I would say however you're comfortable participating would be great. We do have a number of questions that we'll cover together as panelists. So either keep track of them or you should feel free to pop them along. Just know I might not get to them until after we cover some of our prepared content and questions for all of you. I think that was the only housekeeping thing I wanted to say. Just keep those questions coming. Hopefully we'll have time for them. So I'm going to jump right in since time is precious, especially evening time. I'm going to hog the first question, but then I'm going to definitely moderate with my panelists. And I think we will all have our take. And so I'll spread the wealth in terms of who I ask these questions first. So I'll go first. The first question is, how are military applicants judged within the entire pool of applicants? And then how are they judged within the military pool as a subcategory? So I'll speak specifically to Tuck, and then I will hand it along for those who want to add in. For us at Tuck, because I'm the military liaison, I read every military application. Anytime that box is checked in an application for military service, I will be reading it. Every application at Tuck is read by at least 2 people. So for the military folks, I will always be one of the readers, and then we spread the wealth around the rest of the committee. So there's no just a 1-2 punch. And so I also read other files. I don't only read military files. And so I am sort of the conduit through which the military files kind of flow through relative to the entire applicant pool. And then when we are making up admissions decisions as a committee, we look at the military pool within that pool of applicants. So I would very much say that they're not a separate part, other than I'm the only person who reads them all. And what we're looking for is the same criteria as we're looking for in our regular, regular applications, which is smart, accomplished, aware, and encouraging. And so we use the exact same criteria for military applicants as we use for the general applicant pool. And then how the military applicants are judged within that sort of subcategory. We try to keep an eye on a number of things. One is branch representation, trying to keep that at least proportional to sort of the general population, the number of folks in the Army versus Navy versus Air Force, Coast Guard, et cetera. But we try to keep our representation as broad as possible. And then within the branches, we do calibrate to some degree for years of service, the branch that the regiments and the platoons that you serve in. We consult with our current students to some degree. We'll redact names and try to calibrate accomplishment within, particularly like the Army is the biggest pool of candidates that we get, just proportionally. And so I wouldn't really say that we never rank order anybody, but we're definitely looking at Army versus Army, Navy versus Navy. There's a lot more of that than like trying to gauge an Army accomplishment and like directly compare that to a Navy accomplishment, for example. So what that all means for us at Tuck is that it's still very much about your individual story. And probably Nicole, you remember this, like it's just it's the smallest cohort in the top 10 schools at 285. And so it's really about your own personal narrative. And as a panel, we will get to more of this. So I'm going to stop. I feel like I just spoke forever. So I don't know if one of you wants to jump right in. I think the panelist is small enough. You guys can just unmute. I'll keep an eye on you. Who wants to go?
I'll go. I just have a quick
Go ahead.
addendum. I mean, yes, I echo everything you said, Leslie. But I will say, like, one thing, and I'm sure other folks do this, I don't think it's super revolutionary, but we actually have our Veterans Club help us out reading your applications. I think anybody who's on the line might say like, oh, I've had this experience and maybe you don't really understand it because not all of us have had the pleasure to serve or have been in that community. And so I lean on them pretty heavily to tell me, the ins and outs of what is what, right? Because I think, and everybody would agree, like our whole job is to try to figure out who you guys are, everybody, your humanity, your soul, right? And so we lean on them. And then I would just, echo everything Leslie said, and I'm sure others will say, which is, we run a process, that I talk about all the time, that we try to be as fair and accurate as we can in understanding kind of who you are, from where you've come from, and running a process, as Leslie mentioned, 2 reads with the least bias and noise we can on the back end. And so talk about that a lot, but I won't hit that dead horse because you did such a good job, but just wanted to jump in.
And I don't mind jumping in as well. So slightly, we don't have our students read our applications, but our Duke Armed Forces Association is very much an integral part of our admissions process. So we've got clear lines of communication to say like, hey, have you talked to this person or have you talked to that person? And so we really get to know the individuals in that sense and just making sure to say like, okay, who has been connected within our community. So put in a plug for all of our schools, which is reach out to the veteran communities that we have, the student clubs. They want to hear from you. They want to help. They want to pay it forward, but also allows us to know you in a different light as well. So yeah.
Michael, go ahead. Oh, I saw you too, Nicole. You're next.
I'll just very quickly add, so our reading process is extremely similar to Leslie's, so I think that was a great overview. I just wanted to double down a little bit on this idea of that there is somebody at all of our schools who tends to really focus on military applications, and I think it's worth emphasizing a bit in that we're not starting from scratch. So even though none of us maybe have served, I've developed, after reading hundreds of military applications over the years, sort of a base level of knowledge. Again, I am by no means an expert. I often need help, but I feel like I've gotten to here, and it's enough that sometimes I've talked to veteran applicants who feel like they have to really start from scratch, right? Like if they use any jargon, they're in trouble, or they need to include a 4-page optional essay explaining sort of military promotional ranks. And so you don't need to overthink some of that. Like assume the person reading your application has some base level of that. And we might get into this later when we talk about interviews. It tends to be a little bit of the opposite maybe for the person interviewing you, and you adjust the other way. But in terms of your written application, you can have some confidence that we at least know the basics and don't overthink that part.
Super helpful. Nicole.
So I think most of the points have been very well covered so far. I would just add to add on to both what Megan and Michael just said is, the veterans clubs at all of our schools will, or at least at Haas, they will help you prepare your application. So even though we all are very familiar with a lot of the military backgrounds and experience that come in through your applications, the veterans clubs really help to kind of translate your experiences into your MBA application. So through your resume and the work experiences, I think that there's a resource that you should 100% take advantage of.
Thanks, you guys. That was I think we covered like really important points already. So Nicole, since you had to wait through all of us talking, you get the next question. How can female military applicants distinguish themselves from other women and from other military applicants?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a few things I think female applicants can do, female military applicants. I think number one is, going through those resources again. I think, reaching out to the Veterans Club and, talking with as many of the current students as there are, or alumni that are available to talk to, and just see what what other resources are on campus for not only military students, but female students as well. And what is it about the school that is that you find attractive for yourself as an applicant, and really talk about those things in your application, because it helps the admissions committee really understand what you see in that particular school, and that you've kind of done your homework, and it'll show genuinely and authentically in your application why you want to be at that school for those reasons. So that kind of helps stand out, as well as looking at your experiences and really focusing on things that might help you stand out at certain missions or projects that you've worked on, or things that you really have a passion for, that might come out. Sorry, I'm getting a little interruption here. So please feel someone else can go on.
No worries, real life intrudes, no problem.
Yep.
Michael, you were second to last, so you get to go.
Oh gosh, I'll be brief on this one. I would just, and I think Nicole mentioned this, like I would tap into the greater women's community and resources at our schools and also at the institutional level. And so what I mean by that is, like, with very good reason, all of our veterans clubs are incredibly hands-on and offer a lot of resources. I think almost all of our schools offer a veterans weekend. And in terms of affinities, like naturally, as a veteran, you would connect with that and you should attend all of those. But I think it's almost a little bit of a miss of a sort to not take part in other events to get a sense of everybody else who's applying to the school and who your future classmates might be, right? Like one of the best assets of business school, and we could talk more about this later too, is like you're going to be learning and building a network of people with very different backgrounds around you that will help in the rest of your career. And I think attending some of those other events would be really helpful. And so I think almost all of our schools offer a women's weekend, right? And I would highly encourage you to attend that women's weekend to just have some different conversations and meet some different people. And I think that'll enhance your application overall as well. And just on a similar note as the last thing, there's the Forte Foundation is incredible. And I think they offer a lot of really helpful resources for women that you should absolutely take advantage of.
Awesome. Blair, Meg?
I think you guys killed it.
Oh, sorry. Well, you killed as well. Just leaning into what Michael said, like your profile is, we know that you're more than one thing. So leaning into that intersectionality of who you are. So you're a veteran, you're a woman, maybe you're a mom, maybe you're an underrepresented minority, maybe you subscribe to the LGBTQ plus community. So just leverage those weekends, those opportunities, and all those student clubs as well, because that creates a tapestry of who you are. And we get to see you as this whole person. So yeah, and I'm sorry, Blair.
Oh no, I was just saying that you guys answered it very well. You don't need a fifth voice.
Even though Blair just said we don't need a fifth voice, I might only add two for us. I think you probably all would agree with this, but I was thinking really tactically of like the way that female military applicants can distinguish themselves within the pool, and then within like the big pool, and then the military pool. And I say this to all the active duty or veteran applicants that I talk to, but don't be afraid to be vulnerable and tell us hard stories. Our essay questions are, all different from each other to some degree, but for me, and we just had committee last week, so it's very fresh on my mind. There are things that you have seen and done, I think, especially as a woman in the military, that are really distinctive and really formative for you. And don't know that it's kind of what Michael was saying. I think you said this, Michael, that we all have a pretty strong base of knowledge of, what it means to be a woman in the Army or the Navy, or frankly, any branch. And so don't be afraid to kind of double down on that and to name it and own it. And because I know, at least the female vets we have at Tuck, I know that's not their instinct to like brag or tell stories about being brave. And us on this call will all advocate for you, and you will impress those on the committee with your insights and your stories. So I know it's just all of you are trained to say we instead of I, but I'm encouraging you to lean into the I stories. So that's just my bias for everybody, especially as they're applying to Tuck. Okay, so next question. I'm going to send this to Blair. I feel like you very graciously cut yourself off. So what are the most important elements to include on a military resume?
Ooh,
Yeah.
most important. I mean, so that's so difficult to answer because everybody's experience is so different. But it's funny. I'll kind of go back to something I was thinking for the last question too. So I think a lot of people always, they ask us in the back of the room before COVID or now, like, how can I distinguish myself? How should I write my resume? And it just reminds me of, I was talking to my sister a couple years ago and she was applying to graduate school and she's like, okay, so I want to apply to graduate school because I've had this experience and this experience. And I learned this from this and this from this. And I think I want to go get a graduate degree in order to pivot out of this into this. So what should I write about? And I was like, you should write that. Like everything you just told me, that's what you should write. And I think about that a lot because I think about, what do you emphasize? I mean, to answer the question directly, what do you emphasize on your resume? Like, what have you been doing? What gets you out of bed in the morning? What are you most proud of? And, for me, I can say, from my resume evaluation, what's really nice, especially in vet resumes, because, a lot of times if you're in, industry X, you'll have a very distinct, like I did 2 years of X and then I got promoted to Y and then I got a salary boost. It's like a very clear ladder, but in so many industries, including in the military in some places, you're not going to have that like one to one to one. So I call it skills development ladders. Like what person were you when you started your career? What did you learn? What did you do? And then that next, maybe it's not a complete role, but it's a next mission, a next deployment, a next, location. What did you do? What did you learn? How did you grow? And so that's to me, the best way to write a resume. Skills development ladder. What did you do? What did you learn? How did you grow? And then just like being really honest about what you've been doing and what gets you out of bed in the morning, I think feels the best when you're crafting it. I think that was like kind of a left of center answer, but that's a hard one directly.
No, that's awesome. Thanks, Blair. Who wants to go next? It was a tough act to follow. You did a great job. I mean, I'll pop in since no one's unmuting quickly. I will also mention this is super tactical and concrete as opposed to Blair's like perfect framework for thinking about it. Because I do think I know it's actually quite intimidating. A lot of folks who are applying for the military haven't even they haven't kept a resume going like some of us in the professional world, right? All of a sudden you've been 8 years, 9 years in, you're like, ooh, I'm creating a resume. Anyway, what I was going to say though, is if you were consistently ranked in the top 3 in any of your evaluations, that's really helpful for us to see. Because as we've all said, as we're evaluating you unto you, and then looking at the branch that you served in, other Army, other Navy, and then we're thinking about like how we even remotely plug you into a group of civilians. That's really helpful, and you should brag about it too, frankly. But for me, that's a really helpful thing. And I think it's a lost opportunity. If you were ranked like top 3 along the way, you should definitely capitalize on it. So that's super tactical. And I would 100%, especially as a heart of a teacher, Blair said that so well in terms of how you should craft your resume. Any of the rest of you want to pipe in about what you are looking for in a resume or advice?
I'll give a couple of really quick ones. Like quantify. I think the secret's out. So I think our current students who are veterans are really good about coaching everybody on this because it's often one I see. So I think everybody gets it. But the value of the equipment you oversaw, the size of your regiment, all of those are really, really helpful markers for us in terms of understanding sort of the trajectory and robustness of your role. It's really good markers for us and really helpful, and also very much fits the business school sort of recruiting vibe. And so that's a big one. And then I would give like a little extra emphasis on transferable skills. And Blair sort of touched on this in terms of like, what skills have you developed and showing us that ladder, but thinking about like when you've worked cross-functionally in your units or the leadership opportunities you've had, those are skills that business schools are really looking for, and the types of skills you're going to use in group projects in the MBA curriculum and that our recruiters are looking for at business schools. And so really emphasizing those and maybe not removing some of the very, very technical stuff you've done in the Army, or if you're applying to transition to a cybersecurity role in civilian world, but making sure you give enough room for some of the softer skills and more qualitative stuff that might fit in as we translate to the rest of the pool.
Meg, Nicole, you guys want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've all said it. I mean, for me, when I'm looking at a resume, I'm looking for the management of 3 areas: people, projects, and budgets. So just making sure that that's transferable in terms of how we interpret it, as Michael was saying, and you, Leslie, and Blair as well, but just understanding in terms of like how you manage people, how you manage projects. Projects means deployments, can be whatever that can be, and budgets as well.
Nice. Nicole, I know we covered a lot.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't think I can add anything else. All great advice.
Last man standing. Totally okay. Oh, interviews. Dun, dun, dun. So Nicole, since you were last man standing, how can I best prepare for my possible interview?
Mm-hmm.
And so you might, Nicole, want to touch on, maybe we just all briefly touch on how our schools are handling interviews. I mean, they're all virtual
Sure.
now, you know, but
Yeah.
like in our new normal, what that might
Right.
be.
So I'll touch on that first. So at Haas, interviews are done by invitation only. So once you submit your application, it's reviewed, and at that point, it goes through 2 reads, and then if you are invited for an interview, you will get an email asking to schedule an interview. At this time, you have 2 options. You can interview like a Zoom interview with a live person, with either a current student or alum, or you can do a video interview, which is pre-recorded videos of somebody asking a question, and then you would be recorded giving your responses to the questions, and then it is later watched by somebody who would then write up the evaluation and the assessment, which is then part of the entire your entire application, and then looked at and considered in the admissions committee decisions. So that's how we do interviews. I would say to prepare for these interviews, once you get your interview date, really look over your application. Sometimes it's 4 to 6 weeks after you actually hit that submit button. So just refresh yourself on what you actually put into your application is one thing. And then start thinking of different scenarios or examples that you could use during an interview. I think a lot of schools, some of their interview questions will be about, tell me about a time that you showed some leadership. Tell me about a time where you fostered collaboration in a difficult situation. Those types of interview type questions, kind of behavioral type fit questions. So start thinking of examples. And this is another plug for veterans clubs, because they will be really great resources to give advice and help coach you through some of these interview type questions and help you think of good examples that you could use.
Who wants to jump in? Blair, I saw you writing.
I was taking notes.
Were you taking notes?
I wasn't not paying attention. I was taking notes on what I wanted.
Oh, that's not what I meant. I meant you must be ready.
Yeah. Yeah. So Wharton goes a little rogue, and we do a team-based discussion, which is a 6-person interview. So 6 fellow candidates. And I joke that we go rogue, but we've actually been doing this for almost 10 years. We started doing this in 2011, and the first year we did it was 2012. I actually conducted the first team-based discussion in Mumbai, so I feel like I'm like right at the beginning of it. We feel pretty strongly in skills-based interviews. There's a lot of academic research out there that behavioral interviews are sometimes like gameable and a little bit biased, and so that's just our opinion. When you're doing something skills-based, who your true self comes out. That's why we've been running it like that. The pandemic didn't slow us down a lot. We've actually been using Zoom since 2012 to run the team-based discussions. And so we were like Zoom beta users. And when everything blew up in March, we were laughing. We're like, oh, we'll just run it all on Zoom. It's no problem. And then we finally go, well, should we call the Zoom Corporation? Like, do they have the bandwidth for that? And it's just funny to think that we even asked the question, like, should we call the Zoom Corporation, like on March 14th, 2020? Of course, now it's like this huge thing. So we've been running them on Zoom, 6 candidates, and you'll go through a 35-minute discussion. You'll get a prompt ahead of time. It's something very open to anybody, regardless of your background, whether it's military or Teach for America or banking, it's something very kind of Wharton-centric. And then you'll just have a conversation for 35 minutes. And it kind of feels like you're just around a cocktail table without the cocktails, talking to people about solving a problem. And so there's a lot of misnomers out there, but I encourage you to speak to the Veterans Club. or anybody that you have a connection with, and they all kind of just say like, oh, I was super nervous about it, but then it's actually not that bad. The last thing that what I was actually writing down was and this is different, I think, across the market. So I think it's important to talk about like, what people can expect. We do blind interviews, meaning the person evaluating you in your interview did not read your application. And we do that really purposefully, right? Like we feel like the person could either be biased for or biased against you coming into the interview. And we don't want that at all. We want a completely different touch point. And the last thing I'll say, I'm not going too long, is at least how we feel is it's not that you at Wharton crest the interview hill and then you do well and you're admitted, or you do poorly and unfortunately you're released. Really the skills to run a team and know how to like work the room, I always say, is actually a very different skill than getting an A in physics. And I would love the folks to come to Wharton who got an A in physics, but the folks that get A's in physics are typically not the people who know how to run a room. Sometimes they are, but they are not always. And the people who know how to run a room are not always the people that got A's in physics. And so you actually can be the A in physics person and do marginally, and I would love to have you. Or you can do really well and have gotten a B or less in physics, and we would love to accept you. So I say that out there because I think there's this funny misnomer, especially with all the folks on this call, like these elite business schools, that you have to be like this perfect candidate. And that's just not even close to actuality. We want you to be who you are. And if you run the room, but got a C in physics, cool. And the other way, that's fine too. And that's how the team-based discussion is run. And then right after that, we do a one-on-one where we talk about your experiences. So a little all over the place, but I wanted to get those points made.
Cool. I just learned something. Thanks, Blair. Meg, Michael, you guys want to follow up?
Yeah, I'm happy to hop in. So yes, we are similar to Wharton. Our interviews are resume based, so they will not see your application whatsoever. You'll either interview with an admissions fellow or an alum as well. We've got two different types of interview periods. We have an open season. So if you start an application, we have a month where anyone that wants to have an interview, they can have an interview at this point. And then we go into interview by invitation. But what we're really looking forward to is learning more about you, your passion for Fuqua, and kind of key takeaways when you're describing your military experiences. Is like, I want to hear from you, like, what did I learn and how did that change me? And that goes to this DQ factor that our dean talks about. So he talks about our students having a high IQ, EQ, and DQ, that decency quotient. So what did you learn? How did you change? How do you calibrate? And how do you make an impact? So kind of keep that in mind as well. But again, it's going to be a conversation with you, whether it's with admissions fellow or an alum as well, to understand your experiences. And I think everyone mentioned this as well. You all are so incredibly accomplished, and you all are incredibly humble, but lean into sharing those experiences and the things that you've accomplished, because that's what we want to know. Like, that's the joy, that's the nugget. That's how we get to understand what you've done and how you've made an impact and what you will bring and contribute to our community.
Michael, do you want to jump into?
Yeah, so we're bits and pieces of everything here. All of our interviews are done by current students or alumni. The admissions team does not do a single interview all year unless there's an absolute emergency. And that's on purpose. We want somebody else to give us feedback on you. Like many other schools here tonight, we're what I would call semi-blind interviews. So the person interviewing you has seen your resume, but nothing else in your application, much to the same reasons already discussed, in that we don't want somebody who's biased. But I would point out, because it hasn't been mentioned, there are schools where the person who's already read your entire file for a long time and is going to come with very specific questions. And then there's going to be schools, there's top schools, where they haven't even seen your resume. They just walk in and want to talk to you. And so all of these have advantages, disadvantages, but really do your homework and know what to expect. So a good example for the ones where they only see your resume is you might have written an essay about something really important to you, but if it's not on your resume, we have no idea and it's not going to come up. So keep those things in mind and be strategic about that. And then we have a team-based component as well. I won't get too into the details, but it's hopefully we get back to doing it. Ours is in person and we hope people participate. It's just a way for us to understand communication and interpersonal skills. And then one last tip I'll give that I give to almost anybody from any background is just, you might be interviewing with somebody who has a very, very different background than you. So I know earlier I sort of mentioned that you can assume the person reading your application has some basic understanding of the roles you've had and experiences you've had. but a current student who has a finance background might have no understanding of the military or naval service. And so you just want to be a little bit careful of using too much jargon or thinking about, yes, there are security clearances, so how can I translate this experience in this interview? So you want to make sure, you know, that stuff comes through. And so that'll take a little bit of practice probably.
Awesome. You guys are doing a fantastic job. I'll add just a couple little, they're not even really Tuck specific nuggets, but just my general advice. Tuck is similar to most of you guys in terms of the interviews are done by a second year admissions fellow, Tuck admissions fellow, and they only see the resume. In the past, pre-COVID, anyone could come to campus and interview for basically throughout the year. And this year we had one special exception in the first round where you could apply early and get a guaranteed interview. Otherwise this year it's been very much as Nicole had described at Haas, where the files are read and then you get an invite. So that's still tactically what's happening now. We're very anxious to have people back on campus since Tuck is a very distinct experience up in Hanover. But the advice I like to give, especially military applicants about interviews, because it's been alluded to, and Michael, you even really said this, like, because you're interviewing at Tuck with a second year student who only sees your resume, that person could have no dang idea about the armed services, like hardly at all, especially if some of our TAAs are from other countries, so they might not know at all. And so I think it's really worth your time to, certainly our Vets Club will make themselves available for practice interviews, mock interviews. I would even do it with like a friend from work who doesn't know you that super well, and you could give them the questions to ask you. I think there's a lot of value in practicing, since our military applicants, you don't live in that world. You're not, unlike your peers who are applying, even if they're only 5 years out of college, they've had that interviewing experience. Whereas mostly you haven't. And so it's good practice. And the other piece of advice I like to give, and this is just good for any applicant truly, is using the STAR format in answering behavioral questions, which stands for situation, task, action, and result. It just helps you keep your behavioral answers really well framed. I think especially for some of our military applicants, trying to tell a military story, in like a nice, tidy framework is not very easy. And so it's often really helpful to have that framework in your mind, even as you're just reflecting and thinking. And lastly, you can spend like 5 minutes Googling and you'll have like 10,000 business school questions that we probably would be asking those of us who do the behavioral interviews. So yeah.
So also, if I could jump in, I will jokingly say, we're sorry, because if you had 5 other schools on this, you'd have 5 other answers about how we run interviews and 5 different timetables and 5 different mechanisms. So we always joke, we do meet sometimes as schools and we like really try. We're like, okay, can we get this together? So at least it's like on the same week for these candidates. They're really busy. They're deployed. Like, can we work this out? And we can never do it. So just know that behind the scenes, we are trying to make this process easier for you, but we are sorry because it is confusing. Would that be a fair apologies, guys?
Yes, totally. That actually is maybe like a really nice segue, Blair. I'm thinking of like the institutional like momentum for all of us, of like the institutions that we're a part of, right? They all have their own, all kinds of cultural pulls and things we have to grapple with. So yeah, I think that's fair. It's kind of a good segue, honestly, into the next question, which I might throw to Michael first, since I don't know that I've given you a first question. Why should the folks on the call, why should they consider a competitive business school as an option after their military career? Ooh, I love that question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I can tell you, I have heard from so many of our current military students, by the way, who said, I almost didn't apply, or I didn't think I was good enough. And that always makes me cringe because they're doing so well. And that makes me think there's 5 more incredible folks that they serve with who should be applying. And so don't sell yourself short. And so this question is extremely important. I'll go with 2 things quickly here. So one is this idea of, I think I said this before, but there's such a power, like all of our business schools bring together an incredible cohort of folks with different experiences from all around the world who have so much to bring to the table and all very different interests. And it builds a really powerful network. Like one of the most important parts of the business school degree is not just getting you your first job, but building yourself a network for a lifetime of career changes. And you're going to be you learn best from people who have different backgrounds around you. So as opposed to just pivoting into civilian life in one sector, or even into another graduate degree program that's very more traditional academia, I think MBA programs, especially at the top schools, really give you this sort of robust background and a lot of action-based experiences that really will help your career switch. I think the MBA is the best way to make a career switch. And so that should be the ultimate selling point to veterans. Related to that, I would just point out, like, I think the internship is a great test drive, right? And so yes, a lot of our students do an internship and then return to that employer. They get a full-time offer, and that's great. But a lot of our students do an internship in a different industry than they've done before, and they don't really love it. And they're like, "Phew, I did 10 weeks. I got this offer, but it's not for me. I'm glad I figured that out." And I think that's such a better way of exploring some different career paths as you transition to civilian life, than jumping into a role and then having to say, I don't love this, but I can't give up my salary, or it's really hard to look for another job right now. It's like the MBA has a built-in way of, I think, being able to test drive a couple of different career paths from some elite companies. And so take advantage of that.
Awesome. Meg, you're up.
I mean, I can't repeat more than that. I mean, felt like that was very summarized very well. So I don't have anything else to, put on that as well. So.
Awesome. Blair, Nicole, you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just say, like, I talked a little bit openly about just like the power of an MBA, graduate management education in general. And I think Michael did such a good job. But like, when you're thinking, sitting in your seat right now, you're like, whether you want to get skills to continue on in the military, which, we all read applications that want to stick in, or you're looking to pivot your career. Like, there will be other graduate degrees you could go get. Like, you could go get a master's in public policy. You could go do something else. But I think when you look at like the breadth of options you have coming out of a top MBA program, anybody on this call, like the companies that come to our campuses, like these companies, they're not coming other places. Like, they're not recruiting, you know what I mean? So it's like an MBA program will give you more options, period. A master's degree will give you options, but an MBA will give you more options across a range of companies, no matter where you go. So that's just like my plug for graduate management education, like no matter what you end up studying or where you end up going. Michael, yeah, you hit it on the head, but that was just my little.
I will also say, and I think you all will laugh. Nicole, did you want to go? I'm sorry, I totally like.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Again, I agree with Blair. I don't think, or Megan, I don't think I can add on anything more.
Okay. I'm going to give my little spiel, because I think it has, especially maybe because Tuck is small, the small est, but I have said so many times that I feel like business school, especially, and then it's not a plug for Tuck, I'm just sharing my little like slogan. I think it's like a lot of military applicants are attracted to it and succeed because it's like some of the best aspects of being in the military, but they get to chuck out the parts that they don't like. So they get, and at Tuck we have like housing and things that, I think feel like the best. Thanks, Blair. Blair said I can plug Tuck. I'm not trying to, I'm only trying to illuminate like the esprit de corps and the shared sense of purpose, and the way that at all of our schools, our students will come in and, not only will you find your people within the Vets Club, that's easy, but it is what Michael said about like the networking, and all of a sudden you're like your network, but you also like your personality and your personhood, like just exponentiates so quickly. And I just think of like the first year students who come in, especially those who've just transitioned from the military, like in the last few months, some have just transitioned in July. They hardly speak the same language as their peers when they first come in the first couple weeks. And don't worry, I'm getting to the positive part. But then really quickly, they start to see, oh, my leadership skills and my management skills and the things that I learned when I was 24-year-old officer, nobody in the room has that stuff. And so I think that business school is just this, it's what everyone said. And then it's this great way of like doubling down on the things that were so good about your military career, and then allow you to explore the things that you were always in the back of your mind when you were still in the military. And that's true for like 3 years in and 10 years in. So it's really cool to watch. So just I love that like idea. I get a good chuckle from the applicants when I say it's all the good parts, and then you get to chuck the bad stuff. So I'm gonna go, we have like 3 questions. So I'm gonna go to the first one that came in. Thanks to Brian, who wrote in like back in 7:15. I'm just gonna put it out there. You guys can unmute yourselves if it speaks to you. How does evaluating a candidate differ if they are a veteran but have been out of the military for a few years working in another sector? And then secondly, should the candidate emphasize their service just as much as what they've done outside of the military? What a great question. Does anyone want to jump right in there? I'll take it if you guys don't want it.
Well, maybe we can do it together. I think it's, again, it's like so specific, but I think it depends on what you want to do with the MBA, right? Like, so if you like a lot of applications I read, and I would say this is nothing but a positive, like they have transitioned out of the military, they've landed in what they want to do. And their whole application, their essay is like, listen, like I've always wanted to go into investment management. I was really lucky to be able to transition into this role, but I realized like I need more hard skills in order to kind of move my career through that current industry. Like if that's your truth, you need to talk about that. Or say you've transitioned and you landed somewhere and you're like, I do not like the real estate industry. I would like to use the MBA to transition from the military through real estate to investment banking. If that's your truth, then that's what you need to be focusing on, right? But what's interesting is like you're getting skills whether while you're serving or since you've transitioned that are going to be applicable, right? So it's not that you should highlight or unhighlight. It's just really you need to just like tell your story, and the reasons you want to use the MBA to do what it will naturally lead you to talk more about the investment management job or less about it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's personal, but I think you can see a path to take depending on your goals.
Anyone else want to pop in?
I'll just quickly say, and maybe this is like I just finished application reading a couple of weeks ago and it's top of mind, but when I read veterans who've worked in civilian life, it's usually a great thing because it means like you've already been interviewing in the corporate civilian world. And so double down on that. Like I think it's helpful to give us a sense of what you're learning from that experience, what skill set you're using. And if you're going to make a pivot, similar to what Blair was saying, but like connect the dots for us. So if you're pivoting to something completely different than that, just kind of help us explain what you've learned maybe in that role that's not a good fit or what you're looking to pivot to and why that makes sense. But definitely, I wouldn't overlook that or feel like you should ignore it. Even if it's only been a year, I think it's very helpful and is actually usually a really good indicator.
Meg, did I see you unmute? Did you want to add?
No, I mean, I think that's all excellent points. So yes, ditto to that as well. I mean, again, going back to Blair's point, it's like staying true to your story, in terms of like, it can be a balance of you having civilian life, veteran life, whatever it is, but it's the same thing that we look across all applications which is just self-reflection and why you're ready and how that MBA is going to take you to that next level. And then looking at each school's, the things that they have to offer and how you can leverage that as well. And the one thing that I want to back a little bit too is that sometimes it's very hard to decipher what you want to do, especially if you've been in the military where you've been given orders, right? Like you don't have the choices. You go to the next level, to this level, to that next level. So sometimes we call it a Duke when sometimes people aren't really committed to their goal. We call it military vague. So, which is not a bad thing. You're like, well, I think I want to go into like operations or consulting or investment banking, but we want to see some type of direction. So maybe just, again, go back, talk to alumni, talk to current students, refine that. I don't think anyone's going to hold your diploma back if you said, you know what, my life's passion is in consulting, and then you go into something completely different in graduation. But explore those areas and become knowledgeable of those, because that will help you really tell a great story about who you are, and that will come through your application and your interview as well.
Awesome. Thanks.
I will just add one quick thing. As far as applications at Haas goes, just going back to the question about how does the pool work with military applicants who are no longer active duty and they've been in another industry. At Haas, we actually do domestic applications by industry. We pool them by industry. So a military applicant who is coming from an industry outside the military will be pooled in with like a finance pool or a consulting pool, for example. But to Michael's point, I would not play down your military experience just because the the application is not being read by like within the military pool. But certainly I would say you bring a very unique perspective, having the military background and then having left the military to pivot into another industry. To Michael's point, I think it really strengthens that application. So definitely, I think, don't play anything down just because of who might be reading your application.
Perfect. You guys did a great job with that. I'm not going to add anything. I could, but I won't. The next question on the Q&A is, how does the pool work for international applicants in the last round if you didn't receive any feedback after the wait list? I assume you're asking about international folks who have served, and if you didn't get any feedback at the wait list. I'm trying to even decide how I'm going to answer that one. Does anyone have thoughts right off the top of their head? Blair, do you? I can see you thinking. Oh, you're still muted, Lovey.
Sorry, I was reading the question out loud again.
No, no, okay.
Yeah, it's a tough question. Like, how does the pool work? I would say this, like, if you did not get the answer regarding admission that you wanted the first time that you apply, I think we're all really proud to say that we welcome reapplicants with gusto. We read your application with gusto. We love that you are committed to the institution you're reapplying to, so much so that you've chosen to spend the time to reapply. And so, you know, I'm sure none of us, but, you know, I can speak from my own experience, like, we don't take reapplicants lightly, right? We read you soup to nuts, you know, completely, you know, regardless of your earlier applications, just we can compare you to the pool you're in. Because a lot of times, you know, it's just the pools at all of our schools are really competitive. Like, one year the pool might be really deep and one year it might not be. So it just kind of depends on the pool in which you apply. In terms of not getting feedback on your application, I know that's a really tough one. Typically schools, and I actually do not know the answer for you guys, so I don't want to speak just for everybody, but for us, we actually don't give feedback, but I'll tell you why. So the reason and what happens is, we'll say, hey, listen, your application was a little light on X. And then whoever we're talking to will have like a bunch of explanations as to why that was happening, which I'm sure that that is true. However, the decision is made and we don't go back on decision. So I call it kind of the what if rabbit hole. Whenever we go down feedback, like, well, what if this was true? Or what if this had happened? I'm like, right. So we don't give feedback. I know that's tough. I know that's not helpful, but I can say that we read your application with gusto, very seriously on a reapplication, and our reapplicant rate is actually higher than our average admit rate, which I think is very important from my POV. So tough answer to a tough question, but at least your admit rate is strong.
Who wants to jump in?
I mean, I think also, and I agree, Blair, same situation Duke as well, but also we don't give feedback as well, but we want you to do the self-reflection and the research, right? So maybe it wasn't the decision that you wanted, but go back and go through your application and think, like, did you put your best foot forward? Did you submit your best self at this point? And then going back to that network, talk to current students, talk to alumni, and then recalibrate and then put that best essay that you can absolutely do going forward. But we want to make sure that, like, you're sitting back and thinking, okay, I'm self-reflecting. I know that these things were strong. I could have talked about this story in a different way. And I think that will be very helpful in terms of putting your best foot forward. And I would say, again, talk to reapplicants. We all have reapplicants that have been successful through the process. Alumni, current students, they're happy to share their experiences, or even those that were on the wait list that were admitted too. I think we all host different types of sessions in terms of, like, what to do during the reapplication process or the waitlist process. So there's a lot of resources out there before you really need to start asking us questions.
Nicole, Michael? Nope, good. Nicole? Well, I'll only add that we do waitlist feedback at Tuck at applicant's request. And there are obviously many times when we've done waitlist feedback and it doesn't move the needle. And then there are times when we do waitlist feedback and it does. It just goes back to what Blair was saying, like, for all of us managing a pretty big pool of applicants, I would say, especially during COVID time, like, making educated guesses about just about anything is pretty hard. And so the waitlist feedback from Tuck is generally pretty tactical. And it depends on the applicant. And we take great pains to say, here's where we think you might be able to improve. Oftentimes, honestly, it's also about reiterating your interest in our particular school. That can be a part of it, as Megan was saying, like, reflecting on you know, maybe Tuck wasn't your first choice, but as you've gone through the process, you feel more attached to it on the wait list, just as a hypothetical. So anyway, there's a whole bunch of paths that for us at Tuck that waitlist feedback can take. And yeah, and then I will echo about reapplying. I actually think that being a reapplicant is a really good place to be. You basically have the opportunity to apply twice. You have like you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. We will all see your first application and then you get to do another one that's better. Like, that sounds fabulous. So I know you all want to get admitted the first time, but I'm just putting in a plug for the reapplication process, kind of as Meg and Blair both were saying, that it's really not a bad place to be, actually. A little more time consuming. So we're pulling into the final minutes, amazingly. And so the last question, I don't see any others. Blair cleaned up on the chat. So oh, I have a little friend who just joined me. You couldn't see behind my background. What advice would you like to give the folks on the call about particularly for female military candidates applying to our schools? What would be your parting advice for them in this process?
Happy to hop in. I say connect, connect, connect. So connect with the veteran clubs, connect with the different types of women's association clubs as well. Talk to alumni, talk to current students, you know, make sure that you understand their stories as well. I'm going to follow up with Michael, putting in a big plug in for the Forte Foundation as well. That will help prepare you as well. There's so many resources, and then reach out to all of us. We are so excited and eager to connect with you. I'll speak for myself, like I have office hours. I'm sure people have office hours, but just reach out to us. I think hopefully you've taken away from this is that we are a champion on behalf of your story. We are rooting for you. We're all humans in this process. And so we want to make sure that you get across the finish line. So please take advantage of all those opportunities that you can connect with current students, alumni, and ourselves as well, whether it's our diversity events, office hours, and things like that.
I think Michael said it, so I'm literally just repeating something Michael said. Don't self-select out. Don't think that none of these schools are for you. Once you get to know the community, you'll be like, oh yeah, no, I can see myself here. So I would just say that as a broad base. Because sometimes when you're starting this process and, as Leslie was saying, you haven't interviewed your whole career, you're like, this is too much, but it's not. You can totally do it. And please don't self-select out. We would love to have you on campus.
And I would just add, once you've connected and once you've, figured out which schools that you want to apply to, I think really just pick a school that you feel is right for you. I think, focus on the school's strengths, focus on their location, their teaching, the culture at the school, and really, or the size of the school, things like that. And I think, choose the right school for yourself that you feel, most connected to, because I think, you're going to get a great education at any of these schools here tonight. And, there's a lot of similarities between schools, but there are, some slight differences. And I think look at those and see which one resonates with you the most and choose the right one for yourself.
This might be slightly outside the box, but I have this perception over the years that veterans sell themselves a little bit short on the financial aid conversation or don't ask enough questions about it. And that's not fair. You're entitled to financial aid too, and you're super competitive in our application pools and you deserve it. And so even if you have 100% GI Bill, for example, the GI Bill does different things at public and private institutions. The GI Bill might cover a dual degree, and all of our schools offer some incredible dual degrees with other programs, right? And so look into that. I know at Ross, and I frankly don't think we're the only school that does this. Hopefully we are, but I don't think we are. But we created a cost of living scholarship for veterans specifically because we know how competitive you are. And so even if you have 100% GI Bill, you might get a scholarship towards your housing costs, right? And so you should ask those questions. And I've noticed that veterans seem to think of that as an afterthought or pretty bashful because they have such funding involved, but MBAs are really expensive. And so feel free to look into some of that because there's a lot of nuance to that conversation.
You guys just rocked that answer. And I will only overemphasize maybe or emphasize extra. Definitely you should apply to any competitive school, even if you're like, there is no way that school is going to consider me, because I can't even tell you how many times I've heard that in our, especially with our military pool. They think to themselves, especially if you've had a non-traditional path to even this position of applying, gone to a couple different schools, maybe started a community school. I mean, we've all seen these paths. You are so valuable. You've served our country. And I mean, we're biased on this call because this is part of our job, but the institute, all of our institutions see your incredible value. And so don't worry about less traditional path. Don't worry about the name on top of that application, because we all, especially this group, and I can probably safely say like our other competitor schools, we really want to hear your stories. We really want to see your value shine at our schools within those communities of students. So be brave, pull the trigger. Oh, we just lost Nicole. I don't know if that was on purpose. I do want to say thank you to these panelists. It's been so fun to see your faces, and we don't get to do our recruiting trips, but someday again soon. And I'll emphasize lastly, please do, any of you who are left on the call, please do reach out directly to us. Easy peasy, write our names down, go find us. We would love to talk to you. So I think we're good. Christine, I see you're still on the call. Do you have any housekeeping, or should I release the troops?
No, thank you so much for moderating, Leslie, and thank you to everyone who joined tonight and all of our panelists. And we're also fortunate to hear your advice and words of wisdom. And thank you again. Thank you from the veteran community. And I can't wait to share this with everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Leslie.
Have a
Thank
good
you
night,
for being an
everybody.
awesome moderator. Remember, you can't be admitted
No.
if you don't apply. So go for it.
Oh, bye, Nicole.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.